Hi, I'm Tom Loucks, Communications Director, City of Marshfield. Thanks for joining us today. It is council preview time. Yeah, it's already that time of the month here. It comes that quick.
It does, but I got to say, by the weather, we've been in the 70s now for 5 days in a row. It feels like we've skipped right into June.
Yeah, definitely. But we have a lot on the agenda. We're talking about Common Council is going to take place on April 13th. It is my mother's birthday.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
So I do remember that, and just looked at that date. But like you said, we have a lot of stuff to go through, but we want to catch everyone up to speed on what's happening with the mayor position, also with an election that happened yesterday as well. I'll have you talk about that, Steve.
Yeah, Tom. Well, the hearings were held on with respect to the complaint made against Bob McManus, the mayor, back on the 19th and 22nd of March. And I know a lot of people are familiar with it, but some people may not have heard or maybe don't know exactly what went on. And they were to determine whether or not he had, done some things that would mean that he shouldn't be mayor anymore. Ultimately, after the second hearing, the council went into closed session. They talked for almost 2 hours. They came out late that night on the 22nd of March and did vote 8-2 to remove the mayor. Now again, the bar is very high under state law, and it should be high. You need 75% of the total voting body to authorize removal, and they did clear that bar, so Bob McManus is no longer the mayor. I want to thank him again for his service to the community. Was involved in a lot of really good things during the time here, including COVID and his response with the business grants and some other things. So we wish him well. But now that the question is what happens next, we're going to talk about that in a few minutes with the next one of the items on the agenda for the council as to what do we do? Do we not have a mayor? If we have a mayor, when does that person start? How are they selected? And then the other thing is that's new, if I can jump into that, is we did have an election yesterday on April 6th. And I didn't talk to Deb Hall, the city clerk, but I assume the voter turnout was probably fairly light because it typically is for spring elections. There's not quite as much on the ballot as there might be with a governor or a presidential race. But one of the things that did happen was Brian Varsho defeated Ken Bargander for District 4 council member. So Brian will join us, and we can talk about the organizational meeting in a minute, but he'll join us in a couple of weeks to be part of the body. And we welcome Brian, and we thank Ken for his time on council and the things that he was part of accomplishing.
Alrighty, thank you, Steve, for all that. Well, we can jump into it, I think, right away, and then kind of piggyback on to consent agenda. I'd like to do that, if you're okay with that.
That's fine.
Just really kind of talk about, Tom Witzel is the acting mayor, I should say. You don't refer to him as our mayor, you refer to him as council president. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that, if you would?
Yeah, Tom. Tom Witzel's been the council president for, I think, 2 years now. He's wrapping up his second year, I believe. And he made it very clear that he wants to go by the name of council president and not acting mayor. Now, there might be a document here and there that he has to sign with the title of acting mayor. That happened with our recent borrowing, where we're borrowing money for streets like we do every year. But for the most part, council president. What he's doing during this time, Tom, is really just the base level duties that a mayor would cover. That includes running the council meetings, signing official documents like resolutions and ordinances and agreements, those kinds of things, but not really going beyond that to the full depth and breadth of what a mayor is often involved in. And we're just kind of going toward the April 20th organizational meeting. When April 20th comes, the council is going to select a council president. And we're still trying to figure out what that role will be going forward. That depends upon how they want to go with the mayor vacancy. But for now, Tom is keeping the ship running. He's working with city staff and others as necessary and making sure that the business of the city continues, quite frankly.
Alrighty, well that helps out a lot. So the organization meeting could change a few things and how that works. I kind of want to just go right into that, just people are having a question about an organizational meeting. What does that mean? That means new people on boards and committees, or just boards?
Well, it starts off with the possibility that there could be new members on council. Now, in this case, we had 5 council races on April 6th. And 4 of them were won by incumbents. In fact, 3 of them were unopposed. Rebecca Spiros, Tom Witzel, and Nick Paschal were elected without opposition. Pete Hendler had a write-in opponent, and he won that election. Pete did. So he'll stay on council as well. But as I mentioned, Ken Bargander was beaten by Brian Varsho for District 4. So the purpose of organizational meeting is we're seating the new council. They'll take the oath of office. All 5 of them will take the oath of office, even if they've been on council before. And then it'll be a matter of committee appointments and board appointments. So one of the things Tom Witzel will be doing, as I understand, is making appointments to who's going to serve among the council members on the Board of Public Works or the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee, or Judiciary and Licensing. He'll make those appointments. Now, with respect to the committee appointments, which is another part of the process, what happens is the mayor, or in this case the council president, can put forth recommendations, and they won't be taken up until the week after. So at the organizational meeting, it's said, here's the people I want to be on Parks, Recreation, and Forestry, Historic Preservation, and then the council has a week to look at it and say, yeah, these are good, or you know what, I kind of question this person. He doesn't have any experience in this, whatever. What I'm being told by Tom Witzel, I'm getting a little bit ahead of your questions maybe, Tom, but is he's likely to probably not make all the appointments now. He'll probably make some of the ones that we need to do to keep business going. But until we figure out what's going to happen with the mayor or the new council president, maybe allow some to kind of remain in limbo, if you will, until after the April 20th meeting.
Okay, so the April 20th meeting is going to be held on the same night of any other committee meetings, just so I'm aware of?
Yeah, it's weird. It's by ordinance, it's the third Tuesday of the month of April. So on the first Tuesday will be the election, and then 2 weeks later, the new council members take office. But it's a crowded night. So here's what the night is. The Judiciary and Licensing meeting will be held at 5 o'clock. The Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee will meet as they normally do on third Tuesdays at 5:30. The council organizational meeting will be at 6:15, and believe it or not, we're not done. Then the Plan Commission will meet at 7 o'clock to do their regular third Tuesday of the month business. So you say, well, Steve, how can you know that the council's meeting is going to be 45 minutes or less? There's not a lot on that agenda. It's mainly oath of office, appointments, election of council president, and that kind of thing. And the election of council president will be potentially very important here, because that, depending on how they decide to go with next Tuesday on the 13th with the future of the mayor vacancy, that could be the person who would be doing these base duties until the next regular election.
Okay, so that is decided by the council. No matter what, we're going to have a council president. We have to by ordinance. So that'll be done on the 20th.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And Tom Witzel has kind of made it known that he probably doesn't want to be considered again. He's been on for a couple of years, and he certainly appreciates the council support for him in that role. But they'll be making nominations. Somebody might say, I nominate so-and-so, and maybe there could be a couple of nominees. If there's multiple, we'll do voting. They'll actually do ballots and choose a new president for the council.
Okay, and that is for 1 year, 2 year? How does that work?
That is just a 1 year appointment, and they do pick the council president every year by election.
All right. Well, a lot of stuff coming up here in the month of April to be ready for, and a new council member. You mentioned that our council starts new with Brian, and then the rest of the aldermen. What date is that council meeting with the new people take place then?
The 20th of April. April 20th, yeah. And the one thing I want people to know too is, as we welcome Brian, we will give him orientation. We're trying to set up now for him to meet with department and division heads, see their operations. I'm not sure how familiar he is with what Public Works does or Fire does or whatever, and just get him to have a face-to-face time with some of the leaders here, so he comes on the program here with his, with his feet running on the ground.
All right. Well, that gives our viewers here an update on what's happening with the council, with the position of mayor. Have we answered all those kind of questions that you wanted to mention about the steps in the process they will talk about on the council meeting on April 13th?
Yeah, I think we can talk at that item on the agenda about that piece of the puzzle.
Okay, so when we get down to that, let's do that. But I just wanted to give a little higher level piece of that. So if anybody doesn't know, I'm actually doing the switching here today, so I'm doing my best. I'm being production as well as host, so if I don't actually turn it right to Steve right away because it's not a habit, that's why. So, but this is our temporary fix until we get our studio all done, and then we'll be in a new surroundings.
You're doing what you and David often do, double duty on something, because there's only two of you. But these are going to be nice surroundings for you to operate in the future.
Yeah, most definitely. So thank you for being patient with us. I know our audio isn't going to be perfect either, but we want to bring this because we have some, the messaging is so important, and that's why we won't skip it. So, all right, Steve, let's go back into consent, and then we'll work our way back down. And excuse me as I'm putting my phone over here. Let's talk about asphalt paving projects. That's not cheap.
No, it's not. And this is one of the main things, Tom, that you and I have tried to cover on these programs. And the reason we do it is because people are most interested in what streets are going to be replaced or redone. Are they doing mine? Are they doing the other ones in my area that need some work? So what you have in front of you is that maybe about, maybe 20 projects or so that are planned for what's called asphalt mill in place overlay work, which means, and again, we probably talked about this before, Tom, what they do is they take the existing surface and they grind it down and they relay it with another couple of inches of asphalt. In many of these cases, or at least some of these cases, we wish we maybe could rebuild the street entirely, but this is more economical and buys us more good use of the street before we get to that point. So it's a good redo of a street. And you see the list there. Some of them are small pieces, maybe only a block long. I think a couple of them might even be cul-de-sacs. And then others are longer stretches of roadway that need to be redone, and hopefully people will appreciate those. If you're in an area where this is being talked about, you either have received or will receive notice about the projects, what to expect. People have questions like, well, are they going to take down the tree in front of my yard, and what about my driveway entrance? And certainly talk to Tom Turchi, our city engineer, and others with your questions. But we're looking at awarding the bid to American Asphalt of Mosinee for, as you can see, a considerable amount of money. We get up close to $2 million. And they've done a good job for us before, Tom.
All right, so just to understand the process, this is called mill-in overlays?
Yeah, asphalt resurfacing / mill and overlay is something along those lines.
Okay, well, that's Public Works as well as our street department gets involved, but this is an awarded bid, so there's another company out there that is doing this, and this is going to happen starting shortly if this goes through the council. Is that right? It's a time.
Yeah, it's based upon when the contractor can do the work, but we try to get going as early as we can with their availability, because there's a lot of projects on the list. Now, admittedly, like I said, some of them are smaller projects, and they oftentimes, Tom, they try to fit those in between bigger projects that they might have going elsewhere outside of Marshfield. But this is the work that they are going to do this year, and I hope it's well received, because these are streets that have been needing some work.
These are streets that could have large potholes, although we're not tearing the street all the way down to the sewer on this. Is just basically, but I don't like to say quick fix, but a way to get extended life for another 5 to 10 years, right? Yeah,
and when the street can't be fixed that way, then we usually look at reconstruction. Also, if we have to replace sewer and water mains, then you're talking about a total rebuild. But this is really one of the big things, and I oftentimes talk about this as similar to dental work. Like, Steve, how is dental work like street work? But reconstruction is the big dog, so to speak. That's when, like, you need to have something major done. Maybe you have to have a tooth pulled and some other things done. This is the level where you're trying to make sure that you're dealing with the cavities, you're dealing with the maybe even it's a root canal, so to speak. But you're making sure that you're getting the most use as you can out of the roads before they need the more significant work. And it's been a good program for us. Tom Turchi, Dan Connect, Chris Hawley, our street superintendent, and the crew work together, and they interact with the folks from American Asphalt, and they always do a good job.
Well, it's also a way of environmental. I believe you're reusing a lot of this.
We are.
It up, so that's a good thing.
That is true. That's good for the environment, and it works well in terms of getting a good surface down.
Alrighty. Well, that's the thing that you marked in our consent agenda. I didn't think that I'm now on the second page here for our viewers here. Steve, do you want to go with anything else on here that before we get into those start items that you had given me?
No, I think we can head down toward the bottom of the agenda, Tom, because I think that's really where a lot of the conversation will likely take place.
Yeah, most definitely at the end. And again, these are recommended actions outside of the consent agenda. And again, it's early in the agenda process. We need to bring that early. So this is a draft. It's not out until Friday.
Right.
So let's talk, Steve, about the item Q, vacancy position of the mayor. Right by now, I know a lot of people know it. But surprisingly, Steve, we've had people come up here yesterday to file a license for clerks.
Oh.
So it's wow. Sometimes we don't reach all the time.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that we're talking about this position of the mayor. So yeah, surprisingly, we think everyone knows. It's not. It really isn't. We need to look at it that way.
No, and one of the things I tend to do is I live in a bubble at City Hall. We think that because we deal with things all the time, we think everybody else knows, and that's why it's so important that you and David use our various platforms to get the word out, because not everybody does know what we're doing or what's happening here. We touched on this the last time we did a program, and that was very shortly after the mayor had been removed, Tom. But what do they do now? And again, they have three basic options. One is to have a special election. That would probably take 60 to 90 days to hold, according to the city clerk, and it would cost money because we're not partnering with anybody else. It would be on our dime entirely. So that would probably happen in June or July, and that person would be mayor through April of 2022 when the next municipal election occurs. Another would be to just take applications per se, meaning letters of interest, resumes, and have those people come to a council meeting and say, look, you're giving me 5 minutes. I'm going to tell you why I think I'd be good to be this mayor position for the next year. And after the council hears from those people, they would actually select somebody. And we have done that before with a couple of council seats before. Shar Smith comes to mind a few years ago as somebody I believe who was picked through that process. And then the other option is just to let whoever the council president be do what Tom Witzel's been doing for the last couple of weeks, and that is the base duties, the basics, the signing documents, the running of meetings, and but not the full range of duties that a mayor could do. So we'll see what they want to do and look for their direction on Tuesday night.
Well, that'll be important before the organizational meeting. So if they do choose to go with just using the council president for another year, that person that gets chosen then is aware of it. So we'll definitely know the direction the council is going to point where we're going with the mayor's position on Tuesday night.
Yeah, and again, they really do have flexibility, Tom, because there is no mandate that says, if this happens in April, then you do this. If this happens in July, you do this. It really is up to what appears to make the most sense at the time, based on the cost, in the case of a special election, or based upon how long the person will serve. So we'll see what their direction is.
Alrighty, thanks, Steve. Let's talk about masks, and things are changing rapidly with this for the good. I believe that the pandemic is hopefully starting to wind down, but it's not over yet, and we have to be mindful of that. And that means that we still wear masks at City Hall. We're not wearing them right now. We are being as socially distanced as possible.
Yep.
But our audio, you did never hear us in our audio if we wore our masks and we must not do the program.
True.
But let's talk about what you're going to bring up again. This is presented by you. You have quite a few things on the docket, so this is one.
I'll be standing at the podium for a long time, apparently. And I look forward to the day when I'm not standing at the podium, when I'm actually sitting up next to the mayor or council president. But in terms of social distancing, you know how close those two chairs are. It just doesn't really work. So anyway, yeah, what this is about, again, and we've all been following this, the pandemic. It's been a year now, and the state Supreme Court struck down the governor's mandate for masks. And so you say, okay, great, there's our direction. Well, is it really our direction? Every business, organization, churches, cities are all trying to decide, okay, what's right for us now? The Supreme Court has said it's not a requirement, but do we want to keep it in place? And again, I think we've talked about this the last couple of programs, Tom, but the number of cases is declining slowly. The number of vaccinations is rising. So, I mean, there's a time when we're going to be in a safer place, but are we there now? So, I'm asking the council to decide whether or not they want to see the mask requirement lifted for city buildings and facilities. Now, again, this will not include the library, the fire and police stations, and the utilities building, because those are all governed by separate commissions that have their own separate authorities. But it would include a lot of our facilities, and certainly City Hall, right at the forefront. So I've been asked before, why aren't you doing this yourself, Steve? You were given special powers to guide us through the pandemic by the council, but at this point we're talking about going the other way. Not further restrictions, but relaxing. And I really think this is a call they need to make based on their comfort level as to where we stand with the pandemic. Before we have the meeting, Tom, I'll be checking with my peer cities, Rapids, Point, Wausau, other communities, to see what they're doing. Not that we have to do exactly what they do in other cities, but it gives us an idea about what other communities are looking at.
Okay, so we'll hear that in your presentation. You'll be doing some homework, or have done some homework already, and presenting that to the council, and it's ultimately their decision. Is this going to be employees too, or just public?
No, this would be everybody. This is my question is whether or not you want to lift the requirement that when you're in City Hall or when you're in these other places that you need to wear a mask. Now, some employees may choose to do that. Certainly, we've got the plexiglass. We've got some other things that provide some safety, but it will be about everybody in the buildings.
Okay, well, we'll look for their recommendation on that. Let's talk about email accounts. Everyone knows that email is used widely nowadays. We don't use paper, and and that is the record. Let's talk about discussing providing a city email account for certain boards.
Yeah, we brought this up a couple of years ago. I mean, there have been people on different advisory committees and commissions and boards saying, you know what, we have open records requests. So if you're going to say, you know, so-and-so committee member or commission member, I want all your documents, you know, from whatever. Well, you know, people don't want us going into their personal computers, their personal email addresses, you know, or their work email addresses if they're you know, communicating with the staff people at the city via their work address. So they talk about whether or not they could have city email addresses. Well, a couple of years ago, the council decided, based upon some information I brought to them, not to do this. It creates additional cost. It creates additional work for the technology staff to monitor and track all this stuff, and then people come in and have questions about why their email's not working. So I mean, it's not a huge thing, but it's a cost and a time thing that we deal with. Well, what's happened, and you know this, Tom, we were just talking about this with the Fire and Police Commission, all the open records requests. So now people are getting more leery, and they're saying, you know what, this is serious. I feel like I need to have a city email account where I can do all my emailing from, separate from my personal, so no one is looking at my personal emails that I'm sending to my brother and I'm sending to, you know, my finance, you know, whoever representative for my investments, whatever it is. So what I'm going to bring to the council is I'm going to say, okay, let's separate this out. I don't think every committee needs to have city email accounts. A lot of our advisory committees don't have any official powers. They just make recommendations. So they're unlikely to have open records requests being made about them. But if you're on one of these boards or commissions that has power, authority, apart from the council, fire and police being one of them, it probably makes sense that you should have an email account from the city to do your business, to kind of give you a little bit of a buffer on these open records issues. So that's what I'm going to be suggesting, that groups like the Utilities Commission, Fire and Police Commission, Library Board, some of those that have official authorities on their own, that they have city email accounts.
Just want to bring up the word open records for those that may not know what that means. It means some things differently for our city government. If you could just touch base on what you mean by open records for those that may not know, as well as the difference between a government and a private entity, because most of the time you're not going to be able to open records on a private entity. Is that correct?
Right. We live in a bubble or a fishbowl, as I often say, and not everybody knows that. I think we have to do a better job on orientation for new committee and commission members to let them know the world that they've walked into. But while you and I are sitting here, someone might be sending me a request on my computer at my office, saying, Steve, I want all the emails between Tom Loucks, Steve Barg, and Public Works Director Dan Connect for the last year and a half that talk about, you know, leasing space in the old city hall. And you know, we have to provide those. We have to look those up and give them to them. Now there are restrictions. You know, if there's information that needs to be redacted, you know, Tom Loucks' home phone number or Steve Barg's home address. There's also cost that we can charge to them for some of that for the time looking them up. But ultimately, we have to provide these. And I think, you know, as a person who's been in city government for a while, we know how this game works. I shouldn't call it a game, but we know how we respond. But a lot of people don't, and so they need to be educated on, this is serious. You know, your records are being kept, or you have to keep your own records in the case of text messages, in case people want to know what happened here. How were these decisions made? Were there inappropriate communications going back and forth? And that's pretty significant.
Alrighty, well, thanks for the information on that to help our viewers better understand when we talk about open records, which will probably come up with that discussion. That's why you're wanting a city email account. That's really what it is. Right. All right, now moving over onto the next page, and we're going to talk about Facebook Live for city meetings. People have been watching us, so we're not streaming on Facebook. We are still streaming. Can you talk to me a little bit about the decision of, at this point right now, not streaming on Facebook?
Yeah, we may have touched on it a couple weeks ago, Tom, but it's worth repeating because Facebook Live has had a lot of viewers for us. I know during the mayor's hearing that there were, you know, I think 250 at one point when I looked, and that's good. We want people to engage with us, and if that's a better way for them to do it than other, you know, platforms, great. The problem we encountered is you know, these comments coming up during the meeting, and you know, David Bennett, working with you, has been really good about hiding those comments as best he can. The concern comes up when you get a flood of them. You get a lot of comments, and you know, it's too fast to do that. And when I say hiding, we're not trying to hide what the public says. We're just trying, during the duration of the meeting, to make sure that this doesn't come up? Well, there's a couple of issues. One of them being that the first time this was discussed, it was thought that we better be hiding comments because the council sitting up front might see them. They might look at their phone or their tablet and say, oh, looks like the public wants me to vote for item D. I better think about that. I better vote for that project. And that wouldn't be appropriate. That would be a violation of really the whole thing with open meetings. They should come to the podium to express that concern or write a letter. But there's also the idea of whether or not these messages popping up are sort of a distraction from the meeting, and whether or not they constitute an online forum or a blog that doesn't fit with a public meeting being televised, so to speak. So I'm going to bring this up to the council. I'm going to make it clear that on behalf of you and David and myself, we want to see that as many avenues as possible for covering our meetings and activities, but there's a concern that was raised back in 2019 about whether it was appropriate to have comments on the screen during the meeting, and then so the council will have to decide how they want to go, and then the city attorney may weigh in too and say, look, if you're looking at bringing Facebook Live back, here's what you need to be aware of in terms of any legal issues with the kind of records that come up and monitoring and any problems that way. So I think it'll be a good discussion, and we'll find out what they want to do.
All right. So basically, it's because of comments. It's not video. It's the comments. And and at this point right now, you've heard from me that unfortunately we can't stop the comments with that platform. But just so people do know that we are streaming those on our website. So when those meetings take place, you'll be able to see on our website where to go. Be able to click onto that meeting, and for now, until that decision is changed. So is the meeting totally done yet because of a closed session? I know the last meeting was long, and we weren't able to get to that right away. Well, we can't stop because of how our system is wired. So hopefully everyone's patient with us. We're not delaying the process. If you guys are in there for 2 hours, it still takes it's just how it works. So I just wanted to present that. And one thing I wanted to ask about comments, as you mentioned that we have a comment period at the beginning. Yep. And that is used for anything. Is that right, Steve? Any kind of comment? Yeah, it is. And you can come to the podium, or you can get an email or a letter to a council member or me. We'll read it. We've actually read these and said this is a resident on 5th Street who is concerned about the traffic. So there's plenty of ways to make yourself known. And I want to say one more thing if I can, Tom. People might be thinking that we're doing this because we don't like the comments. Steve Barg is an idiot. Well, we better stop having public comment. I don't want people thinking I'm an idiot. It's not about anything that's been written by anybody, any comments. It's about whether or not it's appropriate to have this ongoing feed of comments on the broadcast itself. So and we'll see what happens from that. But like you said before, it's not like we're trying to be anti-transparent. You're on the website live. It's on YouTube live right after the YouTube site right after the meeting. It's on channel 991. We're trying to communicate as best we can with the public, and we're committed to that. Yeah, we definitely want to provide that gavel-to-gavel coverage. As long as you're not go into closed session, we understand that. Right. We're really one of the only media entities that are going to be able to do gavel-to-gavel. You don't see that. I mean, it's just not done. That's something that has always been here, which is, I think, great to provide that transparency. So people can listen. But one thing I did have a question, and then we'll move on to the next, is, and I don't see it in this form of government as much, and maybe they can't do this. If you're past public comment period and there's some items on the agenda, can anybody from the audience at all come up and talk, or can they yield time, or is that not allowed in this form of government? Well, first of all, it's always allowed if there's a public hearing. You see this a lot in Plan Commission, where they have a public hearing about whether or not a certain business can build in a certain area, and the neighbors have all gotten letters. But even apart from that, it's allowed at the discretion of the mayor or the council president who's ever running the meeting. So let's say we're talking about an issue and somebody in the audience raises his or her hand. The mayor or council president may at their discretion allow someone to come to the podium and address that, but it's entirely up to them. They're not required to the same way they would be during the public comment period. Usually what we ask people to do is, and I don't know that we always say this, but if there's an item on the agenda that you want to comment on, do it during public comment. Come up and say, Council, I just want you to know that tonight when you get to item F, I'm really concerned. I don't think this is a good idea to allow this business on Central Avenue, and here's why. That way you get your comment in for sure.
you don't have to depend upon the chair being willing to recognize you, because that may or may not happen depending upon how all the conversation is going.
All right. Well, this our form of government a little bit different than, I don't want to say a little bit different. Everyone's different.
Yeah,
every municipality can or may not have public comment. I came from Wisconsin Rapids. There was no public comment, although council members, aldermen, excuse me, would yield time. So that must be just a different way of doing something versus the way we do. But I think the positive part of it for our residents is that you're allowing public comment, which will continue. So I just want to make sure people are understanding that's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
That's happening. So.
Yeah, and I don't want to say anything negative about Rapids. Everybody has to make their own decisions. I think public comment is a good thing, but I think it's important for people to realize that we can rein it in terms of saying, not that we rein in what you say, but keep it to no more than 5 minutes or some of these things. A lot of cities have done that type of thing in order to make sure that the meeting keeps flowing.
Correct. All right, well, let's move on now to capital improvement projects. We've been discussing that stuff as department heads, and the council's going to have a time to weigh in on that. Is that right?
Yeah, Tom, this is something you're going to hear a lot more from us in the next couple months, you and I, on our programs. This is just really to get approval for the dates in late April and through May when these work sessions will be held. But again, I can't stress enough, everybody gets fired up for the budget. Oh, it's all about the budget. When's the budget coming up? But the CIP is such an integral part of our finances. This is what sets the tone. This is where we say in the next 5 years, this is where we intend to spend our money on major projects. And that translates to being in those years' budgets. So we're talking about borrowing of $17 million for the kind of long-term debt projects like streets and so on. We're talking about other kinds of projects that use other financing sources like room tax revenue or grants or tax levy. So this is important, and I would encourage the people watching us right now to follow this. Ultimately, it will be out on the website when the plan is put out there preliminarily. Look at it, see where we're spending your money or where we're planning to spend your money over the next 5 years. It's a document that does change from time to time. Right now, when you look at the priorities for 2026, 2 years from now, you know what? The priorities for 2026 might change, but at least it shows you where we intend to go. And I'd love to see people weigh in on our anticipated spending on larger projects.
Planning is key in this, just like your personal finances. I know, Steve, you would bring that up in the past here on our program, even to our department heads in our meetings, that if we don't have a plan, which what this is a 5-year plan, right?
Yep, 5-year plan.
And we all know everybody's plan changes, but you have to have a guide. If you didn't, we'd be lost. And that would be fair to the monies because the monies come from a lot of our money's from our taxpayers. Not just, room tax ain't going to fund this whole thing.
No, and I appreciate you saying how I oftentimes bring up personal finances, Tom, because that's how I think of it. You and your spouse at home, and you got a 5-year plan, and in 2022 you're going to replace the landscaping that's dead and everything in the front yard. 2 years later, in 2024, you're going to buy a new car. But if you get to 2022 and it becomes obvious the car is not going to make it till 2024, your spouse doesn't say, nope, can't talk about a car, not on the project list until 2024. So it's a document that gets revised as needs allow or require, but it's something that you use as a guidebook to plan for the future.
Yeah, definitely. It's really important. So thank you so much for talking about that CIP. But my wife would just say no matter what.
Now that's a different topic.
I know. I had to bring that up.
You've moved into different waters.
When I ask if I can buy something, no. So I gotta have a little bit of break the ice here a little bit.
Yeah, well, on the flip side, I'll say at my home, oftentimes I'm trying to make things work longer and longer. And I know sometimes that's not always viewed well because I like to keep that car running, till its last breath, and not everybody agrees with that philosophy either. So.
Yeah, very, very much. So, all right, well, we're well over the 30-minute mark. I actually get to see it here in this thing. Any other pieces that you want to discuss? Otherwise, we'll like we say, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Yeah. No, I don't think there's anything else, but do follow us in the next couple weeks. A lot of what we're doing right now seems like it's just housekeeping, who's going to be the council president and all these types of things, but it's very important business in terms of setting the foundation for the upcoming year.
All right. Well, with that said, thanks again, Steve. It's important to follow us on our city website, our Facebook page. We will continue bringing this information not only in a video, but as soon as I get that information, a lot from the department heads, Steve, I'm able to share it. I'm going to share it right away. I won't wait until our program. because people want to know. So as soon as I get those election results, I know that they're available on both Marathon County's site as well as Wood County's, but I want to get it directly from our clerk. I'll have those hopefully here soon.
Yep.
People will be able to see the exact numbers and the voter turnout. That's always important to see if we hit 20 or 30 or 50%. We don't know in this election. So thanks again for watching us on our council preview. I'm Tom Loucks, Communications Director, City of Marshfield.